Today, we're unpacking a psychological dynamic that is as devastating as it is entirely invisible. We're unmasking the covert predator.
You think they are the victim. That is exactly what they want you to believe. While loud narcissists demand the spotlight, the covert predator uses weaponized humility to slip past your defenses unnoticed. By the time you realize their vulnerability is a mask for hunger, the emotional destruction has already begun.
On one side, we have the loud narcissist, right? Their threat is obvious. It's that in-your-face arrogance that actively demands a spotlight and immediately trips all of your natural alarms. You see them coming from a mile away. But on the other side, we have the covert predator. This is a completely invisible threat. They use weaponized humility, and they survive specifically because their tactics don't actually look like tactics. They just look like sadness. They look like someone who needs a little more patience than most people, or maybe someone who just hasn't gotten a fair shake in life. And that is exactly how they bypass all of your defenses without ever raising a single alarm.
Section 1. Forced intimacy and shortcuts. Okay, let's dive into this. Our first major red flag in the covert predator's playbook is something that might initially feel like a deep, soul-level connection, but is actually a highly calculated manipulation. It's called forced intimacy. So what is this? It's the strategic sharing of deeply personal, often tragic past events way earlier than the relationship's actual closeness would ever realistically warrant. Imagine sitting across from someone on a second date or having your first real chat with a new coworker, and suddenly, boom, they are downloading their most traumatic childhood memories or the devastating details of a brutal breakup. Now, you need to know this is not real vulnerability. Think about how genuine vulnerability actually works in the real world. It builds gradually, right? It requires trust that you establish through consistent, reliable behavior over a long period of time. But this arrives as a strategic shortcut. It is engineered specifically to bypass the natural, healthy boundaries you'd normally maintain with someone you barely know.
And here is the immediate payoff of that shortcut: unearned obligation. Once you sit there and absorb this deeply tragic story, well, if you're a kind, empathetic person, your natural compassion just kicks in automatically. You suddenly feel obligated to treat this person with a profound level of care and delicacy. You start making all sorts of allowances for them. But look closely at what's actually happening here. That care, it hasn't been earned through mutual trust or shared history or time. It's been extracted. It was pulled right out of you through a carefully deployed story, creating a completely unbalanced dynamic literally from day one.
Section 2. The sad fish technique.
Now, this is probably one of the most surprising and honestly original concepts we're looking at today. It's a behavioral pattern designed to keep you constantly off balance. Researchers call it the sad fish technique. Basically, this means manufacturing small, ongoing crises. And here is the absolute genius of this tactic. These crises are never quite catastrophic enough to demand a massive, decisive intervention, like, an emergency room visit or a massive financial bailout. But they are consistent enough to require your continuous attention and reassurance. Maybe it's a mysterious, ambiguous illness, a sudden, super vague conflict with their boss, or just an unexplainable dark mood. And the thing is, these crises are rarely fabricated entirely out of thin air. Instead, they're real, everyday difficulties that get strategically amplified. They are perfectly timed to produce the maximum emotional response from you, usually exactly when your attention might be focused elsewhere, like when you're enjoying a hobby or finally spending time with other friends. Each little crisis functions as a quiet test. They are continuously measuring exactly how much empathy you're willing to extend and exactly how reliably they can count on you to come to their emotional rescue.
Section 3. Self-deprecation as a hook.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it completely challenges what we think we know. We are so conditioned to view self-deprecation as a sign of humility, or maybe just low self-esteem. But in this context, it is something entirely different. It's a weapon. Look at these incredibly common phrases. I am so bad at relationships. I always mess things up. I do not deserve someone like you. On the surface, sure, this sounds like genuine insecurity. You hear a partner or a friend say this, and your immediate gut instinct is to comfort them, to tell them how wonderful they actually are. But functionally, this operates as an empathy trap. Self-deprecation here isn't honesty, it's a hook. The covert narcissist has figured out a very dark truth. Publicly announcing their own inadequacy produces a far more reliable stream of compliments, attention, and care than directly asking for it ever could.
And that hook pulls you right into this deeply exhausting cycle. Step 1. They announce their inadequacy. You know the drill. They drop their shoulders, sigh heavily, and talk about how they literally ruin everything.
Step 2, you, the empathetic victim, drop whatever you're doing and rush in to provide validation and reassurance. You list all their amazing qualities. You build them back up. And then step 3, the cycle repeats endlessly. The very next day or the next week, you are right back to square one. You end up continuously working to convince them of their own worth. It is a deeply exhausting loop that never actually resolves. And why doesn't it resolve? Because resolution was never the actual goal. The goal was always to secure a reliable, endless stream of your emotional energy.
Section 4. Wounded retreat and exhaustion.
So what happens when you finally try to address this exhausting behavior? What happens when you hit your absolute breaking point and try to set a boundary? Well, this is where the trap snaps shut completely. Any attempt you make to point out a pattern that is hurting you gets instantly reframed as a direct attack on someone who is already struggling. They don't respond with obvious, loud defensiveness. They're not yelling at you. Instead, they execute a wounded retreat. It's this quiet, completely devastated quality. They act so profoundly hurt, maybe tearing up, maybe withdrawing entirely, saying that, you know what, you're right, they really are just a terrible person. And boom, the focus shifts entirely away from your valid grievance and right onto their deep pain. Suddenly, you are the one comforting them for the fact that they hurt you, and you instantly feel incredibly cruel for even bringing the issue up at all.
And over time, this wounded retreat totally trains you. Through sheer repetition, you begin to experience these invisible symptoms of exhaustion. Because you feel so inherently cruel raising any issues, you start pre-editing your own concerns before you even voice them. You filter out anything that might trigger that wounded reaction. You maintain this constant low-level vigilance, always monitoring their emotional state and managing your own reactions just to keep the peace. You find yourself performing endless reassurance just to maintain a basic baseline of stability. You're effectively silencing yourself in your own relationship, shrinking your own needs down to absolute zero. And the truly terrifying part of all this, the covert narcissist never had to say a single controlling or aggressive word to make you do it. You are completely depleted by someone who rarely ever raises their voice.
Section 5. Reclaiming your compassion.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core of the issue. How do you break free from an emotional trap that you can barely even see? Well, you have to fundamentally change how you interpret their behavior. You have to learn to differentiate between genuine pain and performed pain. As we established earlier, loud narcissism is extremely visible. Outside observers can easily see the harm. But with a covert predator, everyone else just sees you in a relationship with someone who is unusually sensitive, kind, and just in need of a little extra care. They might even think you are the abrasive one. You are the only one who can actually recognize the extraction happening behind closed doors because you are the only one who feels the exhaustion. You have to understand that this performed pain is engineered specifically to feed off your empathy.
So before we wrap up today, ask yourself a really tough question. In your relationships, are you nurturing a genuine connection, or are you just feeding a quiet predator? Remember this. Recognizing the pattern underneath that appearance is not cruelty towards someone who is struggling. It is the recovery of your own ability to tell the difference between genuine pain that deserves compassion and performed pain that has been engineered specifically to extract it.